The antimatter chandeliers of Nexus Prime's Grand Diplomatic Rotunda were more than mere lighting. They were a statement of power. Each crystalline structure could vaporize a human in less than a microsecond, its ambient temperature a lethal caress that would reduce flesh to plasma before the nervous system could even register pain. To the gathered alien dignitaries, it was nothing more than mood lighting. Princess Zora Vexnar stood at the epicenter of this cosmic stage, her presence a gravitational force that bent the very fabric of diplomatic reality. Her genetic lineage was so meticulously crafted that each breath she took cost more than most planets' annual resources. 3 millennia of selective breeding had produced a being that was less an individual than more a living weapon of political negotiation. The Triaxian royal genome was a masterpiece of biological engineering. Zora's eyes could perceive electromagnetic spectrums invisible to most species. Her neural pathways were quantum-entangled communication networks that could process diplomatic scenarios faster than most supercomputers. When she moved, gravity itself seemed to hesitate, unsure whether to obey physical laws or her royal decree. Around her, the most terrifying warlords in the known universe competed like peacocks preparing for the ultimate deathmatch ballet. Cthax the Obliterator dominated the western quadrant of the rotunda. His exoskeleton wasn't merely armor. It was forged from the compressed cores of destroyed stars, each molecular bond a testament to civilizations reduced to cosmic dust. When he breathed, miniature neutron storms swirled within his respiratory system. His dowry was nothing less than 3 entire solar systems, complete with their resource-rich planets and the trillion sentient beings who called those worlds home. To the eastern side, Renlac of the Plasma Collective shimmered like a living aurora. His body was a pure energy conduit, capable of transmitting information across galactic distances with a thought. Technological archives that could revolutionize communication for the next 10,000 years hung in delicate energy matrix projections around his form. Some of the more fragile diplomatic representatives had to wear specialized shielding just to stand near him, lest they be accidentally ionized by his mere presence. The Hive Queen of Nexmora took up the entire southern approach, a living biological matrix that defied individual definition. She wasn't a single entity, but a collective consciousness capable of spawning entire armies from her biomechanical core. Military might radiated from her like a palpable threat, the kind of force that could crush civilizations between evolutionary heartbeats. Each suitor was a nightmare beyond human comprehension. Each wanted Zora, not for love, not for personal connection, but for the ultimate political weapon her marriage would represent. A union with the Triaxian royal heir could rewrite galactic power structures, crush centuries-old conflicts, or ignite wars that would consume entire star systems. And then there was Michael Rodriguez. He stood near a maintenance alcove, quietly running a quantum-enhanced mop across floors that were already impossibly clean. His standard-issue human maintenance jumpsuit was the color of bureaucratic invisibility, a shade designed to make the wearer blend into the background of any institutional environment. To the assembled cosmic royalty, he was less than an afterthought, a piece of background noise, a functional mechanism no more remarkable than the cleaning protocols that kept the diplomatic station functioning. None of them noticed the way his mop tracked their electromagnetic signatures. None recognized how each methodical push mapped molecular interactions. None understood that the unremarkable human janitor was the most dangerous being in the room. The greatest game in galactic history was about to begin, and absolutely nobody saw it coming. The file marked HFY Sci-Fi Idio Me Gay Blackout told a story that would make even the most hardened galactic intelligence agencies shudder. Michael Rodriguez wasn't just a janitor. He was a walking diplomatic nightmare, a human weapon so precisely engineered that his very existence challenged the fundamental understanding of strategic warfare. His academic records were a study in calculated brilliance. At the Terran Advanced Strategic Institute, Michael had demolished every known paradigm of psychological warfare. His doctoral thesis, Quantum Behavioral Manipulation in Complex Systems, was so revolutionary that it was immediately classified at the highest possible security level. Most of his professors didn't understand the full implications of his work. They simply knew it was dangerous. The core of Michael's genius was his ability to see patterns where others saw chaos. During his final evaluation, he had mapped out the potential collapse of 3 separate interstellar governments using nothing more than public communication data, social media trends, and subtle economic indicators. The simulation was so accurate that it triggered automatic lockdown protocols across multiple planetary defense systems. Military recruiters had fought over him. Special operations units from every branch of human defense forces made unprecedented offers. But Michael understood something they didn't. True strategic power wasn't about force. It was about understanding the invisible connections that held complex systems together. His first major deployment was the Proxima Centauri crisis, a diplomatic nightmare that threatened to spark a war between human colonies and the Centauri Confederation. While traditional strategists prepared for military conflict, Michael developed a communication algorithm that systematically dismantled the political foundations creating the tension. He didn't fire a single weapon. He didn't send a single troops. Instead, he rewrote the entire communication infrastructure, introducing subtle cognitive nudges that made conflict economically and socially impossible. The war that everyone expected simply evaporated. The aftermath was unprecedented. Military leadership was furious. They had been prepared for a glorious conflict, and Michael had transformed it into a bloodless resolution. Political strategists were terrified. He had shown that entire geopolitical structures could be manipulated like complex mathematical equations. His reward: mandatory reassignment. They couldn't court-martial him. His actions had technically saved millions of lives, but he was too dangerous to keep in any position of strategic importance. So they did the only thing they could. They buried him in bureaucratic obscurity. Enter the maintenance division. On the surface, it was a punishment, a brilliant strategic mind reduced to pushing a quantum-enhanced mop across diplomatic station floors. But Michael knew better. This was the perfect cover. Here, he could observe. Here, he could analyze. Here, he was invisible. The mop wasn't just a cleaning implement. Its handle contained a sophisticated sensor array that could analyze molecular compositions, electromagnetic signatures, and communication patterns. Each push across the floor was a data collection mission. Each sweep gathered intelligence that would make the most advanced alien surveillance systems look like children's toys. His maintenance jumpsuit was a marvel of microengineering. Adaptive camouflage technology allowed him to blend into any environment. Embedded communication disruptors meant that no unauthorized scanning could penetrate his personal space. To the universe, Michael Rodriguez was background noise, precisely how he wanted it. Humans were considered the galactic equivalent of a footnote. Technologically primitive, emotionally chaotic, barely worthy of diplomatic consideration. Michael was about to prove just how wrong that assessment was. One mop push at a time. The quantum phase explosives were a masterpiece of destructive engineering. A weapon so advanced it could phase through conventional defensive systems like a ghost through solid matter. When the first detonation occurred, it wasn't a sound. It was a fundamental disruption of reality itself. Most diplomatic security systems were designed to detect and neutralize threats along traditional electromagnetic and kinetic spectrums. These explosives existed in a quantum state that made them simultaneously present and non-present. They could interact with matter in ways that violated every known principle of physics. 3 devices triggered simultaneously in different sectors of the Grand Diplomatic Rotunda. Each was calibrated to create maximum psychological and physical disruption. The Plasma Collective's security team moved first, a living neural network of energy-based defenders that could theoretically react faster than light. They froze, not from fear, but from pure computational confusion. The quantum phase explosives presented data sets that broke their ability to process threat matrices. Cathax's biomechanical defense systems, constructed from the compressed matter of dead stars, began to catastrophically fail. Molecular bonds that should have been unbreakable started to unravel at the quantum level. The Hive Queen's collective consciousness experienced something close to a massive system crash. Millions of interconnected neural pathways suddenly found themselves unable to predict or counteract the incoming threat. And in the middle of this cosmic chaos, Michael Rodriguez moved. He didn't move like an enhanced soldier. He didn't move with technological augmentation. His movement was something far more fundamental, a pure expression of human adaptability. The maintenance cart became his first weapon, not as a physical shield, but as a complex system to be manipulated. In less than 2 seconds, Michael reconfigured its electromagnetic stabilizers, creating a localized quantum interference field that would momentarily disrupt the explosive's phasing capabilities. The fire extinguisher wasn't just a potential blunt instrument. Michael understood its pressurized CO2 system as a potential precision tool. By modifying its discharge pattern through a series of rapid micro-adjustments, he could create localized pressure waves that would temporarily destabilize the quantum phase explosive's molecular coherence. The industrial-grade tape became something between a surgical tool and a precision weapon. Michael used it to create ad hoc quantum entanglement disruption points, essentially creating small zones where the explosive's quantum state would become momentarily fixed and thus neutralizable. What happened next was less a neutralization and more a fundamental reprogramming of the threat itself. Michael didn't just stop the explosives. He transformed them. The quantum phase devices, designed to be the ultimate undetectable weapon, found themselves repurposed. Their core programming was subtly rewritten, their destructive potential redirected into a complex information-gathering matrix. By the time the professional security teams arrived, the threat was not just neutralized, it had been completely subverted. 3 highly advanced quantum phase explosive devices now sat inert, their complex programming transformed into the most sophisticated intelligence-gathering tools in the known galaxy. Princess Zora watched from across the room, her quantum-enhanced perception capturing every microscopic detail of Michael's response. What she saw defied every strategic model in her genetic memory. This wasn't just threat neutralization. This was a complete reimagining of the concept of defense. Humans, it seemed, were going to be far more interesting than anyone had anticipated. The quantum phase explosives were a masterpiece of destructive engineering. A weapon so advanced it could phase through conventional defensive systems like a ghost through solid matter. When the first detonation occurred, it wasn't a sound. It was a fundamental disruption of reality itself. Most diplomatic security systems were designed to detect and neutralize threats along traditional electromagnetic and kinetic spectrums. These explosives existed in a quantum state that made them simultaneously present and non-present. They could interact with matter in ways that violated every known principle of physics. 3 devices triggered simultaneously in different sectors of the Grand Diplomatic Rotunda. Each was calibrated to create maximum psychological and physical disruption. The Plasma Collective's security team moved first, a living neural network of energy-based defenders that could theoretically react faster than light. They froze, not from fear, but from pure computational confusion. The quantum phase explosives presented data sets that broke their ability to process threat matrices. Cathax's biomechanical defense systems, constructed from the compressed matter of dead stars, began to catastrophically fail. Molecular bonds that should have been unbreakable started to unravel at the quantum level. The Hive Queen's collective consciousness experienced something close to a massive system crash. Millions of interconnected neural pathways suddenly found themselves unable to predict or counteract the incoming threat. And in the middle of this cosmic chaos, Michael Rodriguez moved. He didn't move like an enhanced soldier. He didn't move with technological augmentation. His movement was something far more fundamental, a pure expression of human adaptability. The maintenance cart became his first weapon, not as a physical shield, but as a complex system to be manipulated. In less than 2 seconds, Michael reconfigured its electromagnetic stabilizers, creating a localized quantum interference field that would momentarily disrupt the explosive's phasing capabilities. The fire extinguisher wasn't just a potential blunt instrument. Michael understood its pressurized CO2 system as a potential precision tool. By modifying its discharge pattern through a series of rapid micro-adjustments, he could create localized pressure waves that would temporarily destabilize the quantum phase explosive's molecular coherence. The industrial-grade tape became something between a surgical tool and a precision weapon. Michael used it to create ad hoc quantum entanglement disruption points, essentially creating small zones where the explosive's quantum state would become momentarily fixed and thus neutralizable. What happened next was less a neutralization and more a fundamental reprogramming of the threat itself. Michael didn't just stop the explosives. He transformed them. The quantum phase devices, designed to be the ultimate undetectable weapon, found themselves repurposed. Their core programming was subtly rewritten, their destructive potential redirected into a complex information-gathering matrix. By the time the professional security teams arrived, the threat was not just neutralized, it had been completely subverted. 3 highly advanced quantum phase explosive devices now sat inert, their complex programming transformed into the most sophisticated intelligence-gathering tools in the known galaxy. Princess Zora watched from across the room, her quantum-enhanced perception capturing every microscopic detail of Michael's response. What she saw defied every strategic model in her genetic memory. This wasn't just threat neutralization. This was a complete reimagining of the concept of defense. Humans, it seemed, were going to be far more interesting than anyone had anticipated. Genetic design is an art form of absolute precision. Princess Zora Vexnar was the masterpiece of 3 millennia of selective breeding, a living political algorithm designed to make the most mathematically perfect alliance possible. Her entire existence was a carefully calculated equation. 72.6% genetic optimization for political negotiation, 18.3% neural pathway enhancement for strategic thinking, 6.1% adaptive response mechanisms, 3% margin for unexpected variables. That last 3% was supposed to be a negligible factor, a statistical buffer. Instead, it became the most dangerous variable in galactic history. The alien warlord's courtship rituals continued around her, elaborate displays of power that would have made lesser beings weep. Fax presented a holographic representation of 3 entire star systems, their planetary resources meticulously catalogued. Each planet was a potential political leverage point, a living testament to his power. Renlac of the Plasma Collective extended energy matrices that contained technological archives, capable of revolutionizing communication across 1,000 civilizations. The data was so advanced that most species would require centuries to even begin comprehending its complexity. A hive queen of Nexmora offered something even more terrifying, a genetic merger that would produce offspring capable of spawning entire armies with a thought. Her proposal was less a marriage and more a complete evolutionary transformation. Each suitor represented the pinnacle of their respective civilizations. Each was a strategic masterpiece, and Zara found herself thinking about a human janitor who had a small coffee stain on his left sleeve. Her quantum-enhanced perception began to deconstruct Michael Rodriguez in ways that defied her original programming. Where other beings presented themselves as completed systems, he was something else entirely, a dynamic, constantly recalibrating intelligence. The coffee stain wasn't just a random mark. To Zara, it became a complex data point. How did it get there? What were the precise series of micro-decisions that led to this specific spatial relationship between liquid and fabric? The randomness was fascinating. When she approached him after the terrorist incident, Michael's response violated every known diplomatic protocol. "Looks like I'll need to request a new mop. These things aren't cheap." It was so profoundly mundane that her entire genetic lineage momentarily short-circuited. The alien warlords watched in collective incomprehension as the most sought-after political hair in the galaxy began to genuinely laugh for the first time in her engineered existence. Laughter wasn't in her programming. It wasn't a calculated response. It was pure, unexpected randomness. Her genetic designers had programmed her to seek the ultimate political alliance. She was supposed to choose power, territory, technological supremacy. Marriages in her lineage were mathematical equations, not human connections. But something had fundamentally changed. Michael represented a type of intelligence that couldn't be mapped, couldn't be predicted. He was a living, breathing quantum uncertainty principle, a being who existed in multiple potential states simultaneously. The coffee stain, the slightly crooked name tag, the way he held the mop like it was both a tool and a philosophical statement. These were not weaknesses. These were the most sophisticated forms of camouflage imaginable. The alien warlords continued their elaborate courtship, unaware that they were now competing against something they could never understand, a human-shaped anomaly that defied every known diplomatic algorithm. The game had changed, and nobody, absolutely nobody, was ready for what would come next. The moment Zora's interest in Michael became apparent, the galactic diplomatic community declared total war, without firing a single weapon. It began subtly. Facts. The Obliterator initiated an economic embargo so complex it made quantum encryption look like children's arithmetic. Entire human trading networks found themselves caught in microscopic legal traps that had been centuries in the making. Supply lines that had operated for generations suddenly discovered themselves tangled in bureaucratic, impossible geometries. The Plasma Collective launched a different attack. Their communication network began to emit specifically tailored psychological disruption frequencies designed to create maximum institutional confusion. Human administrative systems found themselves fighting ghosts, communication channels that existed and didn't exist simultaneously, administrative requests that resolved themselves before they could be processed. The Hive Queen of Nexmora took a more direct approach. She began genetic warfare, releasing microscopic information vectors that could potentially rewrite human administrative DNA, not to destroy, but to make them fundamentally ungovernable. Each vector was a living algorithm designed to create maximum institutional chaos. Michael Rodriguez taught janitor classes, but these were not ordinary maintenance training sessions. Each lesson was a masterclass in strategic thinking, disguised as basic station maintenance. He transformed seemingly mundane tasks into complex problem-solving exercises that challenged everything the alien diplomatic corps understood about human capabilities. Cleaning isn't about removing dirt, he would explain to the diplomatic station's maintenance staff. It's about understanding complex systems. Every stain is a problem. Every surface is a communication network. Your mop is more than a tool. It's a data collection device. His students weren't just learning maintenance. They were learning a new way of thinking. He taught them how to observe without being seen, how to move through complex systems, how to turn limitation into ultimate advantage. Each lesson was a quantum-level course in adaptive strategy that the alien warlords couldn't begin to comprehend. The maintenance staff became something else entirely. Not just workers, but a distributed intelligence network that could process information in ways no centralized system could match. Zara watched with quantum-enhanced perception, seeing layers of strategy that even Michael might not fully comprehend. The alien leadership's attacks became increasingly desperate. Diplomatic isolation protocols, economic strangulation attempts, psychological warfare algorithms designed to break human resolve. Each attack was met with something worse than resistance. It was met with complete, calculated indifference. Michael didn't fight their machinations. He simply made them irrelevant. When a particularly complex economic embargo threatened to collapse an entire human colony's infrastructure, Michael's response was breathtaking in its simplicity. He didn't challenge the embargo. He redesigned the entire economic model of the colony, creating a system so adaptive that traditional economic warfare became meaningless. The Plasma Collective's communication disruption frequencies transformed into a new form of interspecies communication protocol that made their original attack look like primitive Morse code. The Hive Queen's genetic information vectors, repurposed into a groundbreaking medical research initiative that advanced human genetic understanding by centuries. The warlords began to realize they were fighting an enemy who didn't even recognize their concept of conflict. Conflict, to Michael, was just another system to be understood, another problem to be solved. And he was very, very good at solving problems. The announcement came during the Galactic Convergence, an event so politically charged that entire star systems held their collective breath. Princess Zora Vexnar stood on the crystalline podium of Nexus Prime, her quantum-enhanced voice capable of penetrating the neural networks of a dozen different species simultaneously. The diplomatic hall, a marvel of engineering that could withstand the combined energy output of 3 neutron stars, suddenly felt impossibly small. "I choose," she declared, Michael Rodriguez. The silence that followed was not just auditory. It was a quantum-level disruption that momentarily broke the fabric of galactic political understanding. Thax the Obliterator's exoskeleton began to fracture, not from physical stress, but from pure computational shock. His entire strategic matrix, built over millennia of conquest, simply could not process the input. Renlac of the Plasma Collective became a literal storm of conflicting energy signatures, his body momentarily losing its coherent form as millions of potential diplomatic scenarios collapsed simultaneously. The Hive Queen of Nexmora experienced something close to a species-wide existential crisis. Millions of interconnected consciousnesses tried and failed to understand the political calculus of the moment. Michael stood beside her, wearing the same maintenance jumpsuit he always wore. No grand diplomatic robes, no genetically optimized presentation. Just a human with a slightly crooked name tag and what appeared to be a new coffee stain on his sleeve. But this was no ordinary choice. This was a fundamental reimagining of galactic political structures. Zora proposed a radical new form of governance. No territorial expansion. Open-source problem-solving approach. Prioritizing adaptive intelligence over rigid systems. Dismantling traditional power hierarchies. Creating a collaborative model that valued unpredictability. The proposal wasn't just political. It was a philosophical revolution. Our alliance, Zora explained, her voice cutting through millennia of established diplomatic protocols, is not about power. It's about potential. Michael's contribution was characteristically understated. He didn't make a grand speech. Instead, he simply asked, "What's our first problem to solve?" Their partnership became something unprecedented in galactic history. It wasn't a marriage of political convenience. It wasn't a strategic alliance. It was a living, breathing system of collaborative intelligence. They didn't just challenge existing power structures. They made them irrelevant. Diplomatic archives would later show that in the first month of their alliance, 3 long-standing interstellar conflicts were resolved. A breakthrough in faster-than-light communication was achieved. A new approach to resource distribution was developed that made traditional economic models obsolete. The alien warlords who had competed for Zora's hand now found themselves desperately trying to understand what had just happened. Their most sophisticated diplomatic algorithms collapsed when trying to analyze this new form of political engagement. Michael and Zora represented something entirely new, a partnership that didn't seek to conquer, but to evolve. A collaborative intelligence that was greater than the sum of its parts. He was still technically a janitor. She was still a royal heir, but they were becoming something else entirely. The galaxy watched, simultaneously terrified and fascinated. The game had changed, and nobody, absolutely nobody, was prepared for what would come next. Historians would later debate the exact moment everything changed. Some pointed to the Galactic Convergence announcement. Others argued it was the terrorist attack in the diplomatic rotunda. A few maverick scholars suggested it was that first microscopic moment of contact between a quantum-enhanced royal heir and a seemingly unremarkable human janitor. The truth was far more complex. 50 standard galactic cycles after their initial partnership, the Rodriguez-Vex Collaborative Intelligence Network had become something that defied traditional comprehension. It wasn't a government. It wasn't a political alliance. It was a living, evolving system of problem-solving that had fundamentally rewritten the rules of galactic interaction. Entire species that had been locked in millennia-long conflicts found themselves solving generations-old disputes in matter of standard cycles. Economic models that had been considered immutable were dismantled and rebuilt. Technological barriers that had seemed insurmountable became collaborative challenges. Michael and Zara's approach was deceptively simple. Every problem was a system to be understood. No single perspective held absolute truth. Adaptability was the most critical intelligence. Randomness was not a weakness, but a fundamental strength. Their offspring, if they could be called that, were neither fully human nor fully Triaxian. They were something else entirely. Living quantum algorithms that could simultaneously exist in multiple states of potential. Educational systems struggled to categorize them. Genetic researchers found their very existence a philosophical challenge. The mop remained in its corner of the first diplomatic station where they met, a silent reminder that true power often looks nothing like what anyone expects. Fex's descendants became diplomats instead of conquerors. The Plasma Collective transformed from a purely energy-based civilization to a collaborative research network. The Hive Queen's collective consciousness began exploring individual potential rather than collective uniformity. But it wasn't a utopia. It was something far more interesting. A dynamic, constantly recalibrating system of galactic interaction that valued innovation over stability, understanding over conquest. Michael never stopped being, fundamentally, a problem solver. He just expanded the definition of what a problem could be. Some days he could be found teaching maintenance protocols to young diplomats. Other days, he would be developing communication systems that could bridge consciousness between entirely different biological frameworks. Zara remained the political strategist, but her approach was nothing like her genetic designers had intended. She didn't seek to control. She sought to understand. Each diplomatic challenge was a complex system to be explored, not a battle to be won. Their greatest achievement wasn't political. It was philosophical. They had introduced a fundamental concept to galactic civilization, that diversity was not just to be tolerated, but to be actively celebrated as the most powerful evolutionary mechanism imaginable. Quantum historians would later call it the Rodriguez-Vex paradigm shift, a moment when galactic civilization stopped trying to eliminate randomness and started seeing it as the most powerful form of intelligence. The coffee stain on Michael's maintenance jumpsuit became an unexpected symbol, a reminder that true innovation often comes from the most unexpected places. The universe watched and continued to evolve. The mop remained in its corner, waiting.